Welcome to the Contagion podcast, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each episode spotlights and interviews one transformational leader, their stories, and their advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. If you are a visionary seeking to uplevel your leadership skills, then this is the podcast for you. I invite you today to spread inspiration like a contagion. Welcome to the Inspiration Contagion movement. Welcome to episode 27 of the Inspiration Contagion podcast. Today's show is also being recorded for YouTube, so if you'd prefer to watch instead, please take a look at the show notes to find the link to watch that YouTube video instead. Please welcome me in joining today's guest. We have Bridgit Danner with us today. Bridgit has been a licensed acupuncturist since 2004 and a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner since 2015. After losing everything to toxic mold, Bridgit now educates about toxins and coaches women on how to detoxify through a functional approach. So with that, welcome, Bridgit.
Hey, Holly, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And with that was kind of a brief introduction, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure. So, I think when I was younger, I was sort of like bouncing around with what I wanted to do with my life. But I was super passionate about the environment. So I was thinking about going into environmental law, but I really also loved like natural living. So I ended up going into Chinese medicine, but always wanting to like somehow bridge that and do like, education on the environment or something. But then that never really like happened. I lived in Portland, Oregon. Nobody really needed that education either. But I got very sick, with environmental illness. And then I moved to Arizona to be in a better climate. And then just learning so much about detox and frankly, moving to a place that's more mainstream too helped me realize like there's still a lot of education to be done about environmental health. And so I really kind of switched the emphasis of my practice from like women's health to more like detox and functional medicine. And it's been really rewarding.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that that's really been in the news more, and there's more people speaking to toxins and doing detoxes. So, but it's great that you're focused on the environmental side, because I have noticed that there's not quite as much emphasis on that, specifically when it comes to mold. So I'm so grateful that people like you are helping others that are having that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since we're on the Inspiration Contagion podcast, I wanted to ask you, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what's your secret sauce?
Oh, I like that question. That's something I've really been working on showing up as more. I actually just had a big photo shoot last week for Instagram and my site. And I'm 45 and I just shared before the show, I'm going through a divorce. I went through chronic illness, and I'm still pretty spunky. I'm still pretty I've been through a lot, and I kind of was something I'm really trying to dive into is like, these things that you go through don't have to be the end for you. Like you can still in midlife be very, very fit, still have your beauty. Like, so I'm still like have an exciting career, still like I'm learning to sing and play the piano. Like life never ends till it ends. So you may as well like just really, bite into it. And yeah, even with chronic illness, in most cases there's a way out with managing your health and all that. So I'm really trying to let sort of let my life story be more of an open book right now and be more of an inspiration to people who are going through it. And from the business side, I hope I'm showing an example of some different ways to do things too. I went to online only, I guess 2-3 years before COVID, luckily. And So I'm, thankful to kind of help out a few friends right now who are like, how do I do this online and that kind of thing. So, it's a learning curve, but it is possible to work online if it's something you want.
Yeah, I love that you shared that in your midlife, which I think is really ironic. We say that, 30s and 40s is midlife. I recently saw a post and it was somebody saying that stop thinking that your 40s means you're old. And I completely agree. Like it's a
Yeah.
really sick thing in our society that once you're 40 or older, it's like you're old. And I disagree with that. I have people in their 70s that I'm close friends with, and they are just so full of life. And, in some ways, I think, competing and showing up with more energy than people my age. So I love that
Yeah.
you're sharing that.
Yeah, I think we can just sort of buy into this cultural thing. Like I used to drive me crazy when my patients would say, "Oh, I'm just getting old. I'm just getting old." I'm like, okay, we're all getting old at the exact same rate. But do you want to like fall apart and just say, "Oh, my joints are just stiff," or do you want to look at the fact that you're creating a lot of inflammation in your body by your habits? Because you can like hold on to that story and just become less active, or you can, completely have a different story. I mean, there's, like you said, also there's many older athletes who, they just have to kind of take better care of their health. I'm not a big sports fan, but I know Tom Brady like got super good with his diet, anti-inflammatory, kind of really clean diet, because he was an older professional athlete. And I really just appreciate, that level of dedication I see people do, no matter what if you want to be an athlete or you just want to like have energy for your life. There's so much you can do, and that's kind of like something I keep, pushing. And even if one thing doesn't work for you, one diet, one detox method or whatever, there's so many more to choose from. So just keep at it.
Yeah, I like that. Instead of accepting the storyline of I'm getting older and playing basically the card of victimhood, owning you're part of that and what you can do to make sure that as you age, that you're actually more energized over time. And with all the science and all the resources out there today, I fully believe that we can become the best and better versions of ourselves as we get older if we choose consciously to make those decisions. And I love that you're doing this work, especially for if you wanted to work with business owners, because one of the biggest challenges that a lot of my clients will have is not having consistent energy. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
there are solutions to that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does inspiration mean to you?
Oh, I love all these questions. They're so fun. Um, I guess I would like define it as just like this feeling of like excitement and wanting to move forward. So I just shared I'm like learning piano, and like part of like me going through a divorce is like really like finding my joy again, and a lot of that has come from like singing and just like being an amateur and listening to music. But like I just felt inspired to learn more and do more. Then I had my giant keyboard arrive in the mail, and I'm like, oh my god, what am I doing? This is gonna be so hard. But it's like you have to like continue with the inspiration and continue to find it when your fear comes up. So I think it's so important to follow it and like keep following it even through the things that are a little harder. And similar with health, I went through so much trying to figure out my health with mold, and there's a million factors, but I still had to work full time. I was still a mom. And so I just would tell people, like, you don't have to learn it all at once. But if you read a certain blog or you hear a certain podcast and you're like, oh, I really want to like pursue that thing that they said because I'm inspired, because something it hit my spirit when I heard that, then go do that thing. You don't have to do all the things and exhaust yourself. Just do, or you can listen to a health summit, like just do one or two things you learned that inspired you. So yeah, I guess to me, it's like that thing that just like makes your spirit feel alive. And kind of talking about youthfulness, I think when you follow that and people see that in you, that's what they feel is like that youthful spirit as well.
Yeah, I love that. I also think that there's definitely that excitement factor with inspiration. I also like that you're saying that take action from that because, inspiration almost has action spelled in it in Asian, just
Ah,
missing that C. So find what lights you up, brings you that joy and that excitement, even in your darkest hours. And what is one thing you could do or take action across today to bring yourself more joy or to solve that problem that you're inspired to solve. I love that.
yeah, yeah, just little by little.
Yeah, one step at a time. So, how do you define success for yourself, and how did you arrive at this definition of success?
I love all these questions. They're so interesting and perfect. Yeah, I feel very thankful that over time my definition of success has definitely changed. So I still want to look at like actual financial markers or signs of growth in our business. And I've been a lot better since we have an online retail shop of like, okay, what are our numbers? How many sales do we have? Because it's important to track that. But I think when I was newer to online business or before that, I ran a clinic, like I was just like so hard on myself. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I ever could have felt successful because I was so hard on myself. Just kind of always feeling like it was never enough. And like, when would I be to the place where other people were? And I'm really like not like that anymore. I'm much more satisfied in the journey and, you know, just if I can feel like I'm not worried about money in the moment, that's a big success. My business coach is like, how you feel about money isn't necessarily how much is in your bank account. It's how you're feeling. So I think that's a great point. Um, and like for instance, I'm trying to publish a book, and like the first agent turned it down, and a couple of people were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I'm like, I really don't even care. Like I know it's gonna get finished, and like I'm just so much more comfortable with the process of mistakes and rejection that I really don't take it so personally anymore. Like if I have to try 20 agents and all of them say no and then I self-publish, like I don't think I'll be upset about any of it. So I think success, maybe success is like not taking stuff personally is a lot of it, and like being like content with where I am, while meanwhile striving for more. Like I'd like to have a $10 million supplement company, and I know I'm working towards that. And I don't totally know the pace it's going to take. And look what just happened with COVID. Like everything went so completely sideways. So we don't always know in life like where we're going to be in a year or 10 years. But I know that I'm taking the steps towards it and making relationships along the way, and just doing my best to enjoy the process. So maybe success, yeah, to me is just like the ability to like enjoy the journey and not like beat yourself up along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are really wise words for anybody listening right now, especially with what we're experiencing with COVID and really through any transition in life. Trusting the process of the journey, trusting yourself and your intuition that you're taking the steps, that it will happen in the timing that's right for you, and being happy with the process and where you are in that, not worrying about how much money's in the bank account and being satisfied with where you are financially. And at the same time, like you said, you still have that vision and those financial goals and those metrics and things that you're striving for, but being okay every moment along that process and the journey, I think is so important and so hard to do. Was there anything that you can share with listeners that allowed you to start releasing some of that self-criticism and get to the place where you're able to have more acceptance of failures and feel more comfortable in the moment?
Um, yeah, I would say maybe three things. I mean, one was just picking myself up from when it was really hard and discouraging, and like no, like going back to it, like and working through that. So the next time you have to pick yourself up, it's not as emotional. I had one coach a while back, and he was just, I was just whining, like, this is too hard. I used to honestly think only certain people were chosen to make it online. Like, that was truly my belief. And he was just like, I don't even want to hear you right now. Like, this is like, what, are you just going to give up? And it was hard for me to hear. But later, I just think it's so funny and true. I was just, having so many limiting beliefs, but just being persistent, I would say, was one thing. Another was like having some wins, that, okay, so two similar. One is, I think, having some wins at whatever level and being like, oh, I really kind of got that right. I can like get things right. And then knowing that you need a lot of wins. It just has to keep going and going. And same with this book I'm trying to publish. Like, I've had enough friends publish books and go through all this to know I'm not going to be like famous just because I write a book. Because after first I have to write it, then I have to launch it, then I have to have stuff to follow it. And then maybe I have to, like, it just keeps going. And, I heard Marie Forleo talk about this once because she gets asked this and she's like, yeah, there's some highlights, but then you have to get back to work. You get back to the office, you get back to your team meeting. And so I think like having wins, but also knowing like there's no like pinnacle where somebody just hands you like the big prize. It just keeps going and going. Like, you become president of the United States. Well, it's still a pretty hard job. You still have to actually do stuff. So yeah, I think that like just accepting that and just, luckily I do something I really, really love. And again, just enjoying the journey. And if something isn't a fit, like I was working with someone recently and he wasn't getting back to me, wasn't answering my emails, didn't answer my call. My coach was just like, sounds like you really don't like this guy. Why don't you find another guy? And I think I had this scarcity, like this person's position was so rare. Oh, how could I find another? But I was like, he's right. This is an exciting new project for me. And if I have someone I work with who won't even get back to me, it's not a fit. So like those decisions can be tough, but yeah, like, and lo and behold, the person that is replacing him is like fantastic, like super exciting, super helpful, like night and day. So again, it's like just choosing along the journey, like, this is my rodeo, and like who do I want to have it come along with me. So yeah, I kind of rambling at this point, but like I think like just like again, like knowing it goes on and on, just make it fun for yourself.
Yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. So being persistent, celebrating the small wins, and realizing it's a numbers game where you just need to get a lot of those wins. I also
Yeah,
like the reality check of, yeah, he published the book, but there's still the reality of marketing that. There's still things you have to do after that, and then business and life continue. So
yeah,
it keeps moving. So why not figure out a way to be happy with the journey and the process? I think that's a really important reminder for people that they forget, I think.
yeah, yeah.
So what is a story of inspiration that you're known for?
In my own life, or what do you mean?
Yeah, in your own life. I'd like you to, if you don't mind, if you want to share more about your experience with the mold toxicity and how that helped you arrive at doing business as you are now, or it could be around your transition to moving online.
Yeah, sort of those two are kind of intermingled. So I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I owned a clinic, and it really wasn't all I thought it would be to run a clinic. I was an acupuncturist, and it's kind of your only option is to be a solo practitioner or run a clinic. But it was just stressful for me. I was wanting to leave and be online for a long time, but I also felt sort of obliged to stay, or it was hard to find someone to take over. I didn't want to walk away from it. So that went on for a while I learned about online business and functional medicine, and while I was kind of sick a lot. And I was ate so well, everything from scratch, and I go to bed on time, doing yoga, like but I'd have these major ups and downs, like a lot of infections in the winter. And so it all just kind of came to a head where I got really, really sick and got some more testing, and eventually found out I had the mold in the house. And I almost didn't want to check because I knew like how horrible it would be if it were there. And I was there. So we, remediated the house and did a lot of things wrong. I got a lot sicker. We had to move out. I was in the middle of a big project, living out of my parents' house. Like, it wasn't an easy time, but there were things that I could be thankful for. Like my parents had this vacant house they hadn't moved into. Like, that was pretty darn lucky. We didn't have to pay for it. But it was hard. It was stressful, and your body, especially now, like it's stressful, but your body is under so much physical stress that your anxiety tends to be higher. So it was a hard time. We had to rip our whole house apart, throw away most of our belongings, and then we sold it. We didn't want to try to move back into it. We were pretty sick, so it took kind of a break. It gets to be a long story, but eventually, so we moved back to Portland after taking a little time in the desert. And a few months later, I was just like, my partner and I were like, we can't be in this climate anymore. It just doesn't feel right. We're not as well as we'd like to be. So we decided to move to Arizona, and I really wanted to sell my practice. And I had already tried. It's not easy to sell a small business, but I had this journal that my friend suggested, and almost every day I would write in it, I'm selling the practice, and this is how it's going, and this is how much money I've made. And I do think that practice helped me like stick to it. And there were so many like false alarms. Everybody wants to ask about your practice, but nobody seems to want to buy it, until someone did. And I almost just couldn't believe it. I almost just pushed her away because I just was like, yeah. And she just was all in. She bought it sight unseen from the East Coast, like just cash sale. It was amazing. So I definitely feel like that's something that I created from, really sticking to it. So that just felt good to me, something I had put 10 years of my life in, to be able to sell it. And I had a little foothold online, but I really didn't know how to make, I really hadn't made much money online. So when we moved to Arizona, I ended up loving it here. I'm super happy. So I always tell people with mold too, like, it's hard. It's hard to make a big life change, but in the end, you're going to be happier. Things are going to blossom for you that you don't even expect. So I'm really happy here. I just made the decision when I was here. I'm not going to pick up an acupuncture needle. I'm just going to do my online business. And it also took a bit, but I think like seeing the feedback of what customers wanted and didn't want, I started to get a sense of what they wanted. I've always wanted to have a shop because I love supplements. So just like kind of pulled the trigger on that, which I feel like people really discourage you from doing, but it's not that hard. So I took that plunge. I started to figure out some services that people really wanted. And I think we grew by like 5 times from like 2018 to 2019, like just crazy growth last year. Just really big months, hosted a big event. It was really exciting, and then like this year COVID happened, so things turned a little weird again. So I got like, it's not always linear. But luckily I have a great team. That was, I think, a smart choice I made, is growing team. Even when I didn't really have the money, I was growing my team and getting the help I needed to be a proper business. And we've pivoted pretty well for COVID. We've made the best decisions that we could, and it's helped us become more responsive to, the market. So yeah, that was sort of that transition. And even, I don't know. I don't know what other people would say, but, making these big transitions, they're probably always scary and bumpy, no matter if you have a lot of money or a little money, but I think there's plenty of stories of people losing their jobs suddenly, or, you know, being sick in the middle of it or whatever. And again, if you kind of you see it through, you know, say, oh, I might as well like give this up and like just take a office job. It will pay off. Sometimes I think having a little more online will give you that push to like get her done.
Yeah, no, it's really inspiring for sure. Yeah, those life changes are really challenging. And I know there's so much transition and change in the air today in the world. I can't tell you how many people I've come across just in conversation that are going through moves or layoffs or moving and pivoting their business online. And it is a lot. It's a lot to handle. But like you said, and that's so inspiring that you've had all those challenges and yet you still stuck to it. You use that journaling practice to, you know, in some ways visualize and put out there exactly what you were looking for. So you stuck to it. So I think that's really, really inspiring. So thanks for sharing that. I know when we first spoke on our strategy call that you shared that you're a storyteller leader. So I want to ask you a few questions around that. So do you believe that using stories to inspire and lead is important?
I do. And I think I'm really just learning the skill, like I shared earlier. And I think it just creates a lot of connection. It creates a lot of, what's the word? Yeah, like it lets you create with, like, connect with your customer, or it doesn't even have to be a customer, just kind of a community member at a different, deeper level when you're willing to be vulnerable and share story. I just finished taking an Instagram course, and a lot of what stuck with me was about storytelling. And I had heard this before, but for some reason this time now it was hitting. Like, she was like, people don't want to be sold to, they want to get to know you. And so after that course, you know, I had my first announcement about my divorce. I hadn't shared it all. And then I shared a really personal story during COVID about basically going to the gynecologist a day that I was just a mess, crying my eyes out, feeling I had no hope, basically just begging her for drugs, you know, and I'm a natural medicine provider, but I just was like so low. And I shared that story, and I don't think we've ever gotten as many responses, you know, as when I shared that. So, you know, just, I think especially now with like everybody tries to be so happy on social media and stuff, it's like, it's okay to share some of your mess, you know, whether it's just a messy morning you had at the gynecologist or whatever it is. You know, people love the story of something that was hard that gets, you know, gets better. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I've historically always done it, but I'm learning it. I also grew up in a military family, so I feel like, you know, the stories of my development are, I don't know, somewhat unique as well. So I think those will be some things, you know, that I bring in. Or even, why did I was like an environmentalist when I was a kid. I don't even know why, but those are stories that show why I am this way now. So I think people remember, you know, stories, and it lets them feel that human like spirit. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll have to come back in a couple of years and tell you how my storytelling's coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of power in telling stories and sharing stories and being vulnerable, because especially right now, people are craving connection more than anything, more than content. It's really connection. And I think that sharing those raw stories is helpful because there's, you know, the depression rates are increasing, the divorce rates are increasing. People are under tremendous stress and experiencing a lot of anxiety and feeling disconnected. And this is one of those times where we start to compare and despair. And so people that are posting, you know, the white picket fence image of themselves online and how everything's perfect, which is like 90% of people out there or more, it's really hard, especially when people are struggling. So stories are
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah. Well, I love to hear some other episodes and other types that people are. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, what are some key transformational stories or stories that have stuck with you over time that inspired you?
You mean from like mentors of mine and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it could be your own, or it could be from anybody else you've heard or something you've read.
I'll just share one that came to mind right away. It's a mentor of mine, and she's adopted. Uh, and she shared a story about when she was young and still really recently adopted and was throwing a fit in the grocery store line to have some candy or something like that. And her adoptee dad, I'm sure in a moment that wasn't his best moment, said, "Stop that, or we'll send you back." And that really stuck with her. And she became an overachiever and she tried to just fit in and do all the things, even though, that wasn't really her true inspiration and calling. Um, so, that's just a one time story. But again, I mean, you can totally picture it. You can imagine how this little girl felt to be told something like that so young. So you see people, especially who really hit somewhere big in their career, and you think, oh, they must have just breezed through it. But that's just like one way that one major thing she had to overcome to know, like, she didn't have to keep proving herself to fit in. She could go do what she wanted and choose what she wanted. So yeah, that's a story that really stuck with me. There's another gentleman who lives here in Arizona who actually teaches storytelling. I think I referred you to him, and he's Mormon. So obviously family is really important. He was newly married and like on the brink of divorce, like going to a marriage counselor and like just like feeling he was gonna lose it all. And that's was a big turning point for him around like story and connection and I think it just lets other people know, like, even if you've gone through something really dark, um, you can come out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really powerful. The first story you shared too, because a lot of times if we don't spend time to uncover and transform those limiting beliefs, they're typically what's holding us back, and it could be all the way from childhood. So it's really powerful to uncover that and recognize that that's a big part of who we become, and that we can break through that and actually become more of who we actually were intended to be, instead of letting one scenario or experience affect the rest of our lives. It's very powerful. So, how do you use stories to teach, mentor, and lead?
Well, I kind of shared how I'm sharing more of my story. I will say with my one-on-one clients, and I see a lot less now, but I had many years of seeing one-on-one clients. I think I'm a pretty fantastic listener. Like, I love hearing people's stories, and when I have a new client and they're telling me their whole history and they're like, "Is this too much?" I'm like, "No, just keep going." Like, because I can hear how you're saying things. I can hear what was hard for you, um, and I love doing that as a practitioner because it's so easy to be like, okay, here's 10 more supplements you can take. And that happened to me on the receiving end when I was going through like the most traumatic health thing of my life. And there was definitely some practitioners quite smart, but just didn't show me the empathy that I needed at the time. I needed that maybe more than a supplement. And if I didn't receive it, it was like pretty hard to do the next thing or move forward. I was losing my home. I was like a mess, and I just needed people to see that and hear that. So I really try to hear people's stories and what's the hardest for them, and just say like, "I'm sorry you're going through this. Like, sucks. I can't believe you've been at this 10 years, I can't believe you have to lose. I just talking to a guy, I'm like, I can't believe you're going to have to, if you lose your condo in Brooklyn, it seems pretty amazing. Like, I get it. Like, I get it's hard. So I think also just like letting people share their own story is a big part of it. And as I go to write this, I'm writing a book about mold and doing some interviews. I want to include some interviews with just people who've gone through it. I think it's very therapeutic for them. And again, hopefully, therapeutic for other people as well.
Yeah, I agree that listening and being an active listener, as well as expressing that empathy, especially when people are going through a lot of health challenges or big upheavals and transformations in life, is really powerful. And I think that by allowing them a platform and a space to share their story and to be heard and seen is really therapeutic. And then also, I think it's wonderful that you have a lot of stories in your back pocket to relate to them so they know they aren't alone. They know that other people have walked through something different but similar. I think that that's so powerful, is knowing that other people are also struggling or they have been through that, and that there's still light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I think people do appreciate that I've been through mold. You don't have to go through it to be a great practitioner and be empathetic. Certainly not at all. But, when I tell them, like, yeah, you might have to get rid of most everything you own. Like, I already did it. Like, I know how sucky it is. So I just try to say, yeah, I know. Like, I know. And I know the benefit. So even though it sucks, I'm still gonna encourage you to do that. So yeah, I feel like that's, it took me a long time, frankly, to at minimum 2 years, maybe 3, to like really be willing to like work with mold. And I was still going through my own trauma and illness, but now that I'm a lot out of it, it really gives me like the opportunity to relate to people and kind of know the order of things that they need to take and the emotional stuff they're going to bump up against. So yeah, I'm thankful for that, and I can pay it forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so grateful that you're able to share that. And I agree, you don't have to have direct experience for certain things that you provide with, and you can still provide sympathy and empathy. But I think that it's just very powerful that you're able to provide that direct empathy for mold specifically and other things that you're teaching. I wanted to hop into the lightning round questions next, if that's okay. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book I'm reading right now, or my favorite book? Well, I'll just tell you a couple of books I'm reading right now. I'm reading a book called Toxic about mold and toxins and Lyme disease. And this is a practitioner who's really like dedicated his life to some very complex subjects that no one else really cared about. Patients, his name is Neil Nathan. I also started just reading a David Sedaris book, Calypso, I think it's called. I love his work. It's just so light and touching. So those are a couple of books I'm reading right now.
Awesome. What networking or community group do you love most?
So the group I've spent the most time in is Mindshare, the mentor I told the story about. That's her story. Just a lot of people who really follow their inspiration to do big things. That's why I have like 50 friends who are published authors. They want it, and we all are kind of wired the same way. So that's been a great community for me.
Yeah, I've actually interviewed a lot of people from that community.
Right,
So.
you have. That's how I met you.
Yeah, so it's a pretty amazing community from what I can see so far. What's the best piece of advice that you could share with others today?
Best piece of advice. Well, I'll go for some health advice because it's something I talk about doing every day, is doing some detox every day. And if you have no idea what that would mean, you can go to my website and find out. So that means getting fresh air, doing Epsom salt bath, drinking lemon water, doing a castor oil pack. There's so many ways but I think it really will keep your energy up to be aware of toxins and how to detox. I think it's like an angle of health that I really, really hope in 10, 20 years that there's a much greater awareness of.
Yeah, and Epsom salt baths are not a bad way to end the day regardless.
No, a lot of these methods are really quite pleasant.
Yeah. If you could share one message with the world, what would that be?
I would say similar, like be aware of your effect on the planet with your choices. Because your choices do make a difference. And I think, again, like there's a lot of lack of awareness that, we can just throw a million things away and shop for new crap every day. And like, that doesn't matter. That's what everyone's doing. But that's just what we've grown into, and with a lot of lack of awareness of our environment. So, and again, it can just be little choices and little by little. And we have a lot of resources about that on our site too. But that's my biggest thing I want to impact the world in is, yeah, I love helping people with their individual health, but I would really more like to know that I touched 1 billion people's lives. That's a big number that I'm going for, to just live differently, like be more aware of their own toxic effect on the planet. And that would be like my biggest win.
Yeah, if we could remove some of our own toxicity we're producing, we would need to detoxify less. That would be
Exactly.
great. Get to the root cause, right?
Yeah.
And what's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Well, yeah, around that I just mentioned. And I'm also, formulating some products specifically around mold. So, hopefully I'll have that company to kind of carry on and grow. Because even though I want everyone to live a less toxic life, it's not going to change overnight. And I think that frankly, there will be more complex illness still to come. So we do also need those tools. So yeah, building that company is really what I want to be my legacy.
I love that. Well, this has been a really amazing interview and very inspiring. I love that number of 1 billion and trying to reduce toxicity and building awareness and providing resources to detoxify is amazing. So thank you so much for that. Bridgit is also sharing a researched and cited guide to natural immune boosting supplements. That link will be in the show notes to her website, so you can look at that community guide. Did you want to add anything around that?
Oh yeah, I was just excited you mentioned that. I worked super hard on that in the beginning of COVID, and then people kind of, we're not as interested in it in the minute, but I think come fall, we're going to have more interest in it again. So yeah, I really did the research. Like there's like 1 million citations in there. So, you don't have to guess at what to take or what's hype. So I give dosages and very specific, things you can choose from to keep your immunity up as we go through COVID this coming winter, which I think is going to be kind of intense, to be honest. So that's a great time to start, thinking about protecting yourself.
Awesome. So I'll have that link in the show notes. You guys can check that out and prepare for the fall. I'll also have some other links for how to check out Bridgit's website as well as her social media links, so you can stay tuned and be aware when her book launches. So that'll also be in there. I'm sure you can sign up for a newsletter on her website. Thank you so much, Bridgit. This has been so amazing.
Likewise, I'm excited to share the episode, and I'll have to do a little mini interview with you to kind of showcase you. I love these questions and this topic.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. What is one thing you can do in this moment that will inspire someone? Without action, nothing changes. Be the change you wish to see in the world. If this show truly inspired you, we ask that you share it through your network. Help us spread the light and inspiration in the world. I look forward to seeing you here next week.